Hey there, welcome to the lesson. In this one, we're going to take a look at arpeggios, and it's really just going to be kind of a primer. It's going to be a shorter lesson. I recently got a question from a supporter on Patreon about arpeggios in general and how to get better at them and how to get more comfortable with using them or get faster at them. And so I thought I would put a backing track together so we could practice that. I think that the best way to learn some of these things is just by doing them. And so let me just go over the chords in the backing track first and then kind of break down some things we can do with it. So the chord progression just goes E7 to A7 to F sharp 7 to B7. So it's all it's kind of a bluesy sound with all those dominant chords. And I think it's worth me mentioning how I'm thinking of the key changes, because I'm not thinking of that chord sequence as one key. I'm really switching gears a couple times. So for the E7 that we're going to start out with, I'm really thinking of that as the key of A. So that's like a 5 chord. And then I'm going to an A7. Now I'm drawing from the key of D for that and thinking of that also as the 5 chord. But then as I go to the F sharp 7, now this one's a bit of an outlier and maybe requires me to explain how I'm getting to that one. So I'm still keeping the key of D for that F sharp 7 chord. Now that may seem like it doesn't make any kind of sense because there isn't an F sharp dominant chord in the key of D. But as I've mentioned a few times, or maybe more than that, I use the 6th diminished scale as a default scale. And so what that means is that your 3 position, so Phrygian, can become either a minor chord or it can become a major chord. And because of the other notes that are in the pool of notes in the key of D or any key you're playing in, that Phrygian position also becomes a dominant chord if you want to. It can be a sharp 7 chord, or sorry, a sharp 9 chord or a flat 9 chord as well. So that's how I'm getting that F sharp 7. And then the last chord is a B7. And for this one, I'm borrowing from the key of G. So this is just how I thought of this sequence to come up with some sounds and some kind of a roadmap to improvise over it. But you don't have to think of it that way at all. Like, you could have your own kind of way to think of it. That's just, I wanted to lay out where I'm coming from with it. Then what I did there in the intro of this video, the guitar that I'm playing in the middle section there in that intro is kind of the main melody. And so I took the melody and did uniform voicings of it. So for example, I took pinky finger on the 7th fret of the A string, and I'm using that as my starting point to make a 7th chord. Like that. So I'm going to weave in and out of that, so I don't just play it in order, but I made a little melody out of it. So it goes like this. And then what I would suggest doing next is then try to do that for all of those chords, because they're all dominant chords and we can get away with it for all of them. And then move up on the same string just to get used to that kind of voicing and that fingering and the pattern, and then do it but starting on an A for the 2nd chord. And then do the same thing starting on an F sharp. And then one more time, same kind of voicing, same fingering, pattern, everything, starting on a B. So there are a couple benefits of doing that. You get used to moving around and hearing that same kind of pattern happen. It'll train you to pin down where the notes are in your fretboard, which seems like it's a challenge a lot of times just to memorize all the notes. But if you do stuff like this, it'll help to reinforce where all the notes are. And then you keep dropping pins down, mental pins, of where notes are, and then you can find ones that are relative to that and use it as like a marker to find other notes. So let me recap that again. So it'll be starting with pinky finger for all 4 chords. E7, A7, F sharp 7, B7. So that in and of itself is a really good practice. But, you know, really I got ahead of myself. What you could do as well, if that seems like it's a little too much to throw into the mix right away, you could just do triads of that and just go. And you could simplify it. In fact, I think that's a really good starting point. I probably should have said that first. And on a side note, if part of the challenge for you, if you're watching this and you have a hard time with arpeggios in general, or, you know, one string or one note per string kind of patterns, it might be an issue with your picking technique. And so the last lesson I did address some of those things. You know, even as I was just playing those triads, even though those are relatively simple chords, they're well, actually as simple as you can get, the picking isn't necessarily that easy with that, because you start a phrase on a down and then start a phrase on an up. So you're always having to switch gears that way. So anyway, on a side note, go back and watch that if you feel like you're kind of tripping up on your picking technique. That could be helpful to zone in on that. So now, next up, what I did in the playthrough is I did the same melody, that same pattern, but I played it all starting on the E string now with the middle finger. But I did the same kind of thing where I found the root note. So in this case, I would start up here and do the same. Now you can tell it sounds the same as the thing I played over here, but the pattern is way different. Now, if you want to get better at improvising, I think this is one of the best ways to do it, is to take a pattern and then figure out as many different ways to do it as possible. I know personally, for me, it's crazy how much just playing that same kind of lick in a different spot or with a different starting finger can inspire different things. So anyway, with that in mind, it looks like this now. 12th fret of E. That's a good dexterity exercise as well. So then our next chord is an A7. We do the same thing. And then we're going to go to an F sharp and do the same thing. You could do it on 14 or you could do it down here on 2. This is where I was doing it. And then B7. So that's a second way you can do the same kind of lick. And I should probably mention, you know, we're doing an arpeggio and then mixing in a little bit of chromaticism, just a little bit of movement inside of the chord. I think that if we say, okay, we're only going to practice arpeggios, we can get boxed in a little bit and only hit the notes of the chord. But the fact is, you can come up with some amazing things by doing most of the chord tones and then kind of surrounding the chord tones, doing some neighboring note type things. You know, little chromatic things like that are really, really cool. They give it a different color, kind of almost that Jerry Garcia kind of vibe. So now the third way I did it was starting on the D string. So we did a version starting on the A string, a version starting on the E string, a version starting on the D string. You could really you could take this as far as you want to go. But that's where I kind of capped it off, is starting on the E string. So now we'll be doing the E7 lick, same pattern and everything, except for the fingering will be different. We're going to go first finger on second fret of D. And then do it for A. F sharp 7. And then for B. Okay, so now we've done a version that starts with the pinky finger on the A string, a version of the lick that starts on the E string with the middle finger, and then a version that starts on the D string with the pointer finger. Now, the last thing that I did in the playthrough, well, the second to last thing, was that rather than moving the hand all over the place, I took more of an economy of movement approach, where I tried to move as little left-right as I could. So I started with the pinky finger on the A string on the 7th fret and did that version. And then did the version for A right here so that we don't have to move. And then the F sharp is right here. And then I did another one that starts on the E string, but I did it with pinky finger. And that one's a little different than all the others. Let me do that one again. I mean, this is the blessing and the curse of the guitar, is how many different ways we can do the same thing. It's really pretty crazy, but it's one of the best parts about it. So you can see how when I played through that, there was minimal movement with the hand, left and right, which is really nice. There's nothing wrong with moving your hand left and right, but it's just about your intention with what you're doing and getting the most out of what you want to get out of it. So hopefully the backing track is helpful to practice some of these different chord shapes and arpeggios and patterns and even scale work. You can attach the parent scale to it and make a practice out of that. But the backing track stuff is relatively easy for me to make. So you guys let me know if there are other topics where you would like a backing track. Maybe it's working on diminished chords, or I don't know, Lydian sounding chords, or whatever you guys think. I definitely can make more of those. So let me know. Other than that, I hope it helps, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.